Good morning, everybody. Colin, Tansley and Peter Taylor from Risk Watchdogs.
Good morning, everyone.
Here to sort of share our sort of thoughts on what's going on in the cyber and fraud world. So we've got a couple of bits for you today. Do you want to do that bit, Peter?
Which bit am I doing, mate?
Purpose.
Yeah, with Risk Watchdogs, as always, we're trying to sort of share knowledge, raise awareness in relation to cyber and fraud, but particularly in terms of protecting yourself and preventing yourself from becoming a victim of crime. And also that applies to your clients and people that you're responsible for, your clients, your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it just saves one person getting hurt with, let's say, a ransomware attack or a fraud or whatever, then our job is done for today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to, in the Business Cyber Bites this week, there was, I picked up a statistic that 67% of employees are conducting business activity on their personal devices, which is a bit of a worry, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this crops up, it actually cropped up on a webinar I did yesterday. Somebody asked the question. So if somebody at your place of work, one of your employees, is accessing your company network with their device and hits a link, let's say they're also accessing the company email, and they hit a link which is malicious, potentially they then introduce that malicious software into the company network. So it's another gateway for the bad guys and girls to get in, really.
Yeah.
But to an extent, all this has been exacerbated by remote working, hasn't it? By people working from home with their own laptops, and I know that goes on. I mean, some companies were quick to respond with company laptops, but to a certain extent, it happened so quickly that they were given access, just use your own devices, and it brings with it a whole host of problems then. And whether people have addressed that or not, you would hope some of the bigger organizations would have caught up with that now and plugged that gap, because we've had plenty of time to do it. But there will be companies that will continue to do this, and I get it. But there should be some things they should be considering.
Pardon me, Colin. Quick sneeze.
That's all right. And there's something called BYOD, which is bring your own device, and having a policy to sort of deal with that. If you're going to allow employees to use their devices at work, then there should be some boundaries set. And if you're going to let them access the company network, well, fine. And that can, sometimes that has to happen. But should you consider giving them a company device, i.e. a smartphone, or allow them to use it? So things like a policy for bringing your own device, and what you as an employee are going to tolerate, what you're going to allow them to access. I would suggest another thing: if they're able to access the company Wi-Fi, then you segment the network, that you don't allow them onto the business side of it. You have almost like a guest network that they're allowed to use. So policies, procedures, train your staff, they're some of the solutions I would suggest. I'm sure there's a few more, but it's something that came up the other day. I'm aware that we've talked before about two-factor authentication. So companies have implemented that, but I know of a couple of companies that the employees have to use their personal devices to log on with the 2FA. So, so that brings with it its own sort of challenges, doesn't it? So I think it's something that we know goes on, but if you're going to allow it to happen, then you need to sort of introduce some mitigation to sort of lower the risk.
Absolutely.
Politics,
one thing that I did see was sort of within the InfoSec community, I saw people saying that it was impossible for somebody who, say, has got a virus or a problem on their home router. It was impossible for that to get through to the work router.
Right.
Well, it just isn't, is it? If they're using the same device, it can spread, across. Yeah, you can end up. I certainly know one guy, and they all picked up viruses from logging on to a relative's Wi-Fi. The other one as well is if they're working in a Starbucks cafe,
Yeah.
You've obviously got the risk of public Wi-Fi, not just Starbucks, anyone, but also Wi-Fi impersonation.
Yeah. Road one.
I saw some hackers doing an experiment in the Trafford Centre where they just changed the name of their phone to free Wi-Fi Trafford Centre, and people were logging on to their Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
So I think you've got to manage the risk.
Yeah.
Bring your own devices actually was like good news 10 years ago. People going, oh, just bring your own device. And it saves time, saves costs, but convenience always creates problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's about not ignoring it. It's not going to go away. And people are using them more. 67%. That's 2/3 of your workforce.
Yeah.
So just deal with it. Would be our suggestion. All right, mate. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is yours.
Okey-doke.
Okey-doke.
This has been going on for quite a while, but there's been one particular case. I think it was a vicar who came home, was warned by neighbours that people were carrying out repairs at his house. He'd been working away, and he rolled up, and the new owners were registered with land registry as owning the house. They'd gone through a purchase. What I found quite interesting was that a lot of people were trying to be supportive to him and saying, almost like treating the new owners as though they were the fraudsters.
Right.
But the fraudsters were the people that impersonated him in order to sell the property. So, how are these things kind of caused? Well, poor anti-money laundering controls by conveyancers and lawyers. I was doing a talk on cybercrime and fraud for a group of legal execs, and I went around doing a round robin of saying, how does fraud impact what you do? And all the conveyancers informed me that they weren't impacted by fraud because they were involved in conveyancing. They were all totally receptive once we talked about it. But are you sure that the vendor is really the vendor? Are you relying just on looking at a driving license and saying, this is genuine? It looks all right to me. Well, the forged driving licenses are pretty close to one-on-one, as are forged passports. And, just because we're used to seeing a lot of them doesn't mean that we're forensically trained, know what we're looking for, or we know how to check with DVLA and people like that. Somebody's put it really well, and it's been repeated many times. It's matching the physical identity with the digital identity. Relying on one without the other is insufficient. They'd obviously opened a bank account for the money to be paid into the fraudsters. So again, same thing with the bank. Was this account opened up, have the money paid in, and then it gets moved? They'd managed to fool land registry, into transferring the ownership, but land registry gets something, via solicitors also, it all looks like everything else, and that's what fraudsters like to do. One thing that has come out from these, and as I say, these have been going on for years, this isn't new, and various factors, people having two homes, for example, Airbnb, there was one there where somebody hired a house for a long time, and then when the owners came home, they found it sold it. That was a quick, cheap sale of a very posh house. But what you can do if you're in England and Wales is you can actually get an alert put on with land registry, so you're told of any searches or checks that are done on your property.
All right.
So that's well worth considering. Is it down to the owner? Well, certainly this owner, he probably might not even know about it now if it hadn't been for neighbours. So actually being a good neighbour and speaking to your neighbours matter. And then there's a question of whether or not the purchasers are actually innocent purchasers. I think more often than not, they are going to be innocent purchasers just by the law of logic that, they're left sitting holding the baby and they're going to be going into legal disputes. But I have had cases where the innocent purchaser hasn't been an innocent purchaser, that they've actually been in on it. So I'd be certainly looking at how they came to know the house was for sale and things like that. Enablers, people bringing people together to do this. The police said it was a civil matter. People got annoyed because the police weren't investigating it. I think, to be fair, by the time it gets to the police or gets to this, there is going to be, no matter what the police do in terms of the fraudsters, there is going to be a civil case. You know, it is going to go to court or some kind of agreements got to be reached. But the blame is the fraudster.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I've noticed. There seems to be an absence. You know, people annoyed at the new, as I say, the new owners. I've seen people sort of taking the mickey out of the new owner, sorry, the previous owner, for not being careful and not doing this and not doing that. But it still comes down to what we've got to remember is it's the criminal.
Absolutely.
You know, the criminals that have actually done this, and we need to make it as hard as possible for them. So we need better AML.
Yeah.
If you can put alerts on things like land registry, your credit records and whatever, do it. But what we've also got to do, I'm not going to put the sites up at the moment, but these novelty passports, driving licenses, utility bills, pay slips and all this, and this, you know, this is for fun only.
Yeah, it's not for fun.
Yeah, we need to shut these these sites down. We've got to stop tolerating them. Okay, if we're driving back to the dark web, you know, they'll pop up there. Or the you know, anything that makes it harder and marginalises the criminal, the fraudster, for me is a good thing.
Yeah, I've seen. You know, well, you know, on the course we talk about this, that you know, there's surface websites you can go and create utility bills, which is purely about what's the novelty value of that? It's purely to be used by fraudsters to get around the system. Yeah. All right, mate. Very, very good. I didn't know about the land registry, actually. That's a good one.
I can't help but always look at. I'm always trying to think of, well, what's the solution to that, or how can we improve and be better? So, but I have, as I say, I've seen a few of these. I've not dealt with one for a long time. Whereas, as I say, the innocent purchaser wasn't an innocent purchaser. They were part and parcel of it. But as I say, I look to see kind of what can you do, and it is joining up the digital and the physical. And what people seem to be doing is they're doing the physical or the digital. You've got to bring them together. It's only checking two things: £130,000, you know, worth of house gone, £130,000 in a fraudster's pocket, and you know how little does it cost to maybe do a DVLA check or
what we offer with Iris, actually, because you know, without wanting to sort of ram it down people's throat, you know, Iris can help you understand the risks from an AML perspective, from a fraud perspective, from a cyber perspective. It helps you, give you a purpose in terms of prioritized action plans, so it's traffic lighted. And, you know, from regulated businesses, you're able to demonstrate very, very easily you're taking steps to improve your security. Maybe it won't stop you getting attacked. Maybe it won't stop you getting unwittingly involved with a fraudster, but you're then going to be able to demonstrate you've taken reasonable steps to do everything you can, you know. And
because here at the moment, you're gonna, you know, in this particular case, you're going to have the innocent purchaser thinking, I'm going to end up having to give this back or pay compensation. You've got the lawyers checking the professional indemnity insurance. You've got the bank, somebody somewhere saying, are we liable for this? You know, so you've got to have planned for this as a possibility. To be doing your job properly.
Yeah, it's about making good decisions based on, you know, what you know and what you don't know, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. So there's your piece, mate. Your favourite?
It's my let's be careful out there. Let's look after each other. Let's look after our customers. Let's look after our clients. But most important of all for me, let's look after our friends and family. As Colin says, if this week one person doesn't fall for a scam, then that's job done. And over a year, that's 50 people, and that makes risk watchdogs worthwhile. Yeah.
And if you're listening, tell other people about it, because let's make, as Peter said earlier on, make it as hard as possible for criminals to do what they do. All right, and thank you very much, Peter. It was really interesting. Thank you. And we'll be back next week, same time, same channel, we hope. All right, let's